The marriage contract sits in front of me, ink still wet, and I can't scream, can't beg, can't even whisper no. 13 years of silence, and my father finally found a way to make it profitable. Across the table, Luca Moretti watches me with dark eyes that have seen too much blood, waiting for my signature, the one that will bind me to a killer, a criminal, a man whose name makes grown men flinch. My sister's pregnant, my father's desperate, and I'm the bargaining chip he's been saving for exactly this moment. If you're drawn into Evelyn's world, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. So, the lawyer's office smelled like expensive leather and lies. I sat perfectly still in the chair my father had positioned me in 20 minutes ago, hands folded in my lap, eyes fixed on the mahogany desk between us and the man who would apparently become my husband. The late afternoon sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across documents I hadn't been allowed to read. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious, uncaring, alive in ways I'd stopped being years ago. Miss Cross, the lawyer, Dominic something I'd already forgotten, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. Do you understand the terms being presented? I didn't move, couldn't have answered even if I'd wanted to. She understands. My father's voice came from beside me, sharp and dismissive. Richard Cross, real estate developer, philanthropist, liar. He wore his favorite Tom Ford suit, the navy one he saved for important deals. I was apparently an important deal. Evelyn is perfectly capable of comprehending what's being offered here. Offered. As if I had a choice. Across from us, Luca Moretti leaned back in his chair with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to prove anything to anyone. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 32, 33, with the kind of face that belonged in old Italian paintings. Sharp jaw, dark hair pushed back from his forehead, olive skin that suggested Mediterranean ancestry. But it was his eyes that held me. Deep brown, almost black, and unsettlingly direct. He'd been watching me since we'd walked in, not with the predatory assessment I'd braced for, but with something closer to curiosity, like I was a puzzle he hadn't expected to find interesting. The terms are straightforward, Dominic continued, shuffling papers with bureaucratic efficiency. Marriage between Evelyn Cross and Luca Moretti, to be formalized within 2 weeks. Miss Cross will maintain her personal accounts and property. Mr. Moretti will provide appropriate housing, security, and financial support. Both parties agree to public appearances as needed to— Skip to the important part, my father interrupted. His knee bounced beneath the table, the only tell that he was nervous. Richard Cross was never nervous. The protection clause. Dominic cleared his throat. Yes. In exchange for this union, Mr. Moretti agrees to resolve certain business disputes that have arisen between the Cross family and affiliated parties. Additionally, Mr. Moretti will extend protection to Miss Sarah Cross and her unborn child, ensuring their safety from any retaliatory action stemming from— Sarah. The name barely registered as sound in my head, but my hand moved to my chest, fingers splaying over my heart. The gesture I'd used since I was 12, since the night my voice had been ripped away along with my mother, my sister, Sarah. My father's hand clamped down on my wrist, pulling it back to my lap. Evelyn. I looked at him then, really looked at him. At the man who'd read me bedtime stories when I was 5, who'd taught me to ride a bike in our driveway, who'd held me while I'd sobbed silently in the hospital after the accident. The man who'd slowly, methodically, over 13 years, turned my silence into something he could control, use, profit from. You'll do this, he said quietly, leaning close enough that only I could hear. Or Sarah pays the price for my mistakes. You know what these people are capable of. You know what they'll do to her, to the baby. My chest constricted. I knew. Of course I knew. My father's business dealings had been questionable for years. Everyone knew that, but recently he'd crossed a line, borrowed money from the wrong people, made promises he couldn't keep, and now those people wanted payment in blood or alliance. Sarah, 8 months pregnant and glowing with the kind of happiness I'd forgotten existed, had no idea she'd become collateral. Mr. Moretti. My father straightened, releasing my wrist. My daughter agrees to your terms. Does she? Luca's voice was different than I'd expected. deeper, with the faintest trace of an accent that softened his consonants. He hadn't looked away from me once during the entire exchange, because I haven't heard her say that. The room went very quiet. Dominic shifted uncomfortably. My father's jaw tightened, and I felt something crack open in my chest. Surprise, maybe, or the beginning of something like hope. No one ever waited for my response. No one ever suggested I might have one. "My daughter is mute," my father said, each word precisely enunciated. "She's been unable to speak since she was 12. I'm authorized to make decisions on her behalf regarding I can read." Luca cut him off. He pulled a phone from his jacket pocket, typed something, then slid it across the desk toward me. "Sign language. I can learn it. Or we use this." I stared at the phone. The screen showed a notes app, blank and waiting. My father started to object, but Luca raised a hand, not threatening, just final. The kind of gesture that said the conversation was over because he decided it was over. "Miss Cross and I need to speak privately. You can wait outside." "Now wait just outside." This time there was steel in it. "You're in my building, Mr. Cross. You came to me because you're desperate and out of options. So let's be clear about who has the power in this room." My father stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. For a moment I thought he might actually argue, might actually remember he was my father, and not just a businessman protecting his assets. But then he looked at me, really looked at me, and whatever he saw made him turn toward the door. 5 minutes, he said. "Take 10, Luca replied. "Get some air. You look like you need it." The door closed with a soft click. Dominic gathered his papers and followed without being asked. And then it was just us. Me and the man I'd been sold to. Luca picked up the phone, stood, and walked around the desk. He moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence was always an option, just one he'd chosen not to exercise yet. When he got close, I tensed, old instinct, older fear. He stopped immediately. Crouched down so we were at eye level. Held out the phone. "Here's what I know," he said quietly. "Your father made enemies, bad ones. They wanted his head, but I convinced them to take a deal instead. Marriage into my family buys him protection, legitimacy, a way out of the mess he created." He paused. "But you didn't create that mess. And from what I can tell, you're the one paying for it." I took the phone with shaking hands, stared at the blank screen. "So here's what I need to know," Luca continued. "And I need you to be honest, because I don't do well with lies. Are you being forced into this? Because if you are, we can find another way. Your father's debt isn't your responsibility." I looked up at him, studied his face for the trap, the angle, the manipulation I knew had to be there. Men like him, men with power and money and blood on their hands, didn't offer escapes. They offered different cages. But his expression stayed steady, patient, waiting. My thumbs moved over the screen. "My sister, Sarah. She's pregnant. If I don't do this, they'll hurt her." Luca read it, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. Then he nodded. "The Valentinos, yeah, they would. So I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice." He said it simply, like it was fact. "It's just that some choices cost more than others." He stood, moved back to his side of the desk, but didn't sit. "Here's mine. I need this alliance. My family needs it, but I'm not interested in a prisoner. If you agree to this marriage, you agree to it as a partner. Equal footing, your life, your decisions. I won't control you, and I won't let anyone else do it either, including your father." I typed quickly. "Why would you offer that? You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I know men like your father. And I know what it looks like when someone's been backed into a corner." He slid a business card across the desk. "This is my private number. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Call me or text me, whatever works, and tell me yes or no, your choice, not his." He won't let me say no. Luca's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Then he'll learn something about what happens when people try to control things that don't belong to them." Before I could respond, he walked to the door and opened it. My father practically fell into the room, followed by Dominic. They'd obviously been listening or trying to. "We're done," Luca said. "Evelyn will contact me with her decision by tomorrow night. The wedding is contingent on her agreement, not yours." "That's not... She already..." My father sputtered, his face reddening. 24 hours, Mr. Cross. I suggest you use that time to think very carefully about how you want this to go. Luca's attention shifted back to me. Evelyn, it was a pleasure meeting you. He said it like he meant it. I stood on shaking legs, still holding his phone with my message on it. He noticed, walked over, and gently took it from my hands. His fingers brushed mine. Brief, warm, completely inappropriate for a business transaction. Keep the card, he said softly. You'll need it. My father didn't speak to me on the drive home. Not until we pulled into our estate's circular driveway, past the fountain that had been my mother's favorite, under the oak trees she'd planted the year I was born. Then he turned to me, his expression somewhere between desperation and fury. That man is dangerous, Evelyn. You understand that, right? Luca Moretti isn't some romantic figure from a movie. He's a criminal. His family built their fortune on drugs, weapons, violence. People die when they cross him. I pulled out my phone, my own this time, and typed. Then maybe you shouldn't have made deals with people who want to kill you. He flinched. This is for Sarah, for the baby, for our family. No. This is because you're a coward who gambled with money you didn't have and lost. Watch yourself. His voice went cold. I'm still your father. I still make the decisions in this family. And you will marry Luca Moretti whether you like it or not, because I'm not letting my daughter and grandchild die because you decided to grow a conscience. He got out of the car, slammed the door hard enough to make the frame shudder. I sat in the silence, watching him disappear into the house. Then I pulled out Luca's card. Simple, expensive cardstock with a phone number embossed in black. Nothing else. No name, no title, no company. Just a choice. Sarah found me an hour later in the garden, sitting on the stone bench near the rose bushes Mom had loved. My sister looked like an illustration of pregnancy perfection. Glowing skin, that serene smile, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly. She'd always been the pretty one, the social one, the one who made friends easily and laughed freely. Where I'd gone inward after the accident, she'd gone outward, as if determined to live loudly enough for both of us. Hey, she sat down beside me, careful with her balance. Dad said you had a meeting today. Some kind of business thing? I pulled out my phone. He's arranging a marriage, for me. Sarah's eyes went wide. What? Evelyn, that's who? Why? Luca Moretti, to settle debts. The Moretti family? Her voice pitched up. Oh my God. Dad's involved with them? How? When? I shook my head, shrugged. I didn't have answers, just pieces of conversations I'd overheard, documents I'd glimpsed in his office, the increasing tension that had gripped our house for months. Sarah grabbed my hand. You can't marry him. Tell Dad no. You have rights, Evelyn. He can't just... He says, if I don't, they'll hurt you. The baby. The color drained from her face. That's not... He wouldn't... But she stopped because we both knew he would. Our father had been making desperate moves for months. This was just the most desperate one yet. I'll figure something out, Sarah said firmly. Ben and I can leave. Go somewhere they can't find us. You don't have to sacrifice yourself for... I squeezed her hand, typed quickly. They'll find you. Men like that always do. And I won't let you spend your life running. So you'll spend yours trapped instead? Maybe it won't be a trap. Even as I wrote it, I wasn't sure I believed it, but Luca's words kept circling in my head. Partner. Equal footing. Your choice. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, her expression shifting through a dozen emotions I couldn't name. Finally, she pulled me into a hug, awkward because of her belly, but fierce with love. You've been taking care of me since Mom died. When do you get to be taken care of? I hugged her back, breathing in her familiar scent, vanilla and lavender. Trying to memorize this moment, this feeling of safety, in case I never felt it again. When we pulled apart, I showed her my phone. Tell me about the baby. What did the doctor say? She let me change the subject, spent the next 20 minutes chattering about nursery colors and baby names and whether they should find out the gender or wait for a surprise. I listened, nodded, smiled when I was supposed to, pretended everything was normal, but in my pocket, Luca's card burned like a brand. I waited until midnight to call him. The house was dark. Sarah and Ben asleep in their wing, My father barricaded in his office with his whiskey and his mistakes. I stood in my bedroom, the same room I'd had since childhood, filled with relics of a life that felt like someone else's, and stared at my phone. 23 hours and 47 minutes since he'd given me a choice. 13 years since I'd felt like I had one. I typed out the message 3 times before I sent it. This is Evelyn. I need to know what you're getting out of this. Besides the alliance, his response came in less than a minute. You're direct. I appreciate that. That's not an answer. No, it's not. A pause. 3 dots indicating he was typing. Then, can I call you? This is easier to explain out loud. I hesitated, typed, I can't talk back. That's okay. I'll talk. You listen. If you want to respond, text me. Before I could second guess it, my phone rang. I answered, pressed it to my ear, held my breath. Evelyn. His voice was different over the phone, more intimate somehow, less guarded. Thanks for calling. I wasn't sure you would. I waited. Here's the truth, he said. My family has been trying to go legitimate for 5 years. We still have business on the wrong side of the law. I won't lie about that. But we're transitioning, cleaning up operations, investing in legal ventures, building a different kind of empire. The problem is people don't trust that. They think it's a trick, a play for more power. He paused. I heard him moving, the clink of glass on glass, pouring a drink maybe. An alliance with the Cross family, old money, established reputation, all that society bullshit. It gives us legitimacy we can't buy. Opens doors that have been closed to people like me no matter how much money we throw at them. Your father needs protection. I need respectability. It's a good deal on paper. I typed, and off paper. Off paper, he said slowly. I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of relationships that are about transactions and power plays. I'm tired of people being afraid of me. His laugh was short, bitter, which is ironic since I just agreed to essentially buy a wife. But when I saw you today, sitting there being treated like you didn't matter, like your opinion was just an inconvenience to be managed. He stopped. I don't want that. If we do this, I want a real partner. Someone who challenges me, keeps me honest, reminds me why I'm trying to build something better. You think I can do that? I think you've survived 13 years in a world that tried to erase you, and you're still here, still fighting. Yeah, I think you can do anything you set your mind to. I closed my eyes, felt something dangerous bloom in my chest, something that felt like hope. What are the rules? Smart question. I heard him smile. Okay. First, you're not a prisoner. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want. I'll provide security, but they're there to protect you, not control you. Second, separate bedrooms until and unless you decide otherwise. This marriage doesn't come with certain expectations, if you understand what I'm saying. I felt heat creep up my neck, typed quickly. Understood. Third, honesty. I need to know if something's wrong, if you're unhappy, if I'm screwing up. I can't read minds, and I can't read silence. So you have to communicate with me somehow. Text, sign language, carrier pigeon, whatever works. Carrier pigeon might be difficult. Damn, that was my first choice. I surprised myself by almost laughing, caught it before it became sound, but felt my lips curve. Fourth, he continued, his voice going more serious. I'm not a good man, Evelyn. I've done things that would horrify you. I've hurt people, killed people. That's not going to stop just because I'm trying to build something legitimate. Sometimes the old world comes knocking, and I have to answer in the old way. I need you to understand that, to be okay with it, because I won't hide who I am from you. I thought about that, about the violence that must live in his hands, the blood that must stain his past, about whether I could live with that, stand next to that, maybe even, eventually, love that. My father is a bad man too. He just hides it better. Yeah, Luca agreed quietly. He does. I want one more rule. Name it. My sister. She stays protected no matter what. Even if this doesn't work, even if I leave, even if you decide you don't want me anymore, Sarah and the baby are off limits. Forever. Done. No hesitation. Anything else? I looked around my room, at the photographs of a smiling little girl who'd love to sing, who'd performed in school plays and sung in the church choir and never shut up. At the piano in the corner that hadn't been played in 13 years. At the life I'd lost and the life I was about to choose. When's the wedding? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparations I wasn't consulted about. My father hired a wedding planner who descended on the house like a perfumed hurricane, armed with fabric samples and flower arrangements and guest lists that read like a who's who of Boston society. I was measured for a dress, shown options for venues, presented with menu choices for a reception I didn't want. Through it all, Luca texted me daily. Morning. How are you holding up? The planner is suggesting ice sculptures. Thoughts? Your father just sent me a seating chart that puts his business partners at the head table. I vetoed it. You get to choose who sits where. This is your wedding too. I know this is overwhelming. Just remember, you can still change your mind, right up until you sign the license. I didn't respond to most of them. Didn't know what to say. How to navigate this strange in-between space where he was my fiancé but not my choice, my future but not my desire. But I kept every message, read them late at night when the house was quiet, and I felt like I was drowning. Sarah tried to talk me out of it 3 more times. Ben, her husband, looked at me with barely concealed pity every time our paths crossed. My father grew increasingly manic, throwing himself into wedding preparations with the fervor of a man who saw salvation in expensive flower arrangements. And I got quieter, smaller, more invisible. Until the day Luca showed up at our house unannounced. I was in the library, curled up in the window seat with a book I wasn't really reading, when I heard the commotion downstairs. Raised voices, my father's sharp tone, then a deeper one that cut through the chaos like a knife. I don't care if it's inconvenient, Richard. I'm here to see my fiancée. She's not prepared for visitors. The wedding is in 5 days. She's overwhelmed. She needs to not be locked in this house like a prisoner. Footsteps on the stairs. Where is she? I stood up as the library door opened. Luca walked in, and for a moment we just stared at each other. He was different than I remembered. Less formal in dark jeans and a black Henley that showed the edge of a tattoo on his collarbone, his hair slightly disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. Behind him, my father hovered anxiously. Hi, Luca said, his expression softening when he saw me. Sorry to barge in. I was in the neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. We both knew that was a lie. He lived on the other side of the city. Can we talk? He glanced at my father. Privately? Now see here. That wasn't a request. Luca's attention never left me. Evelyn, is it okay if we talk? I nodded. Watched my father's face redden, saw him start to argue, then think better of it. The door closed behind him with more force than necessary. Luca moved to the window seat, but didn't sit. You haven't answered my texts in 3 days. I got worried. I pulled out my phone. I'm fine. That's bullshit. He said it gently, but firmly. You're not fine. You're getting married in 5 days to a man you barely know. Your father's treating this like a corporate merger. And from what I can tell, no one's asked you what you actually want. What I want doesn't matter. It matters to me. He sat down, leaving space between us. Talk to me. What's going on? I stared at my phone, at the cursor blinking on the empty screen, at all the things I couldn't say because they were too big, too complicated, too raw. Finally, I typed, I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm being erased piece by piece and no one notices. Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then, I notice. I looked up at him. You think I don't see you? He continued. That I don't pay attention? Evelyn, you're the most visible person in every room you're in. You just don't speak, so people pretend you're not there. But I see you. The way you listen when people talk. The way you notice things other people miss. The way you took care of your sister at that dinner last week, making sure she was comfortable, getting her water before she had to ask. He leaned forward. You're not disappearing. Other people are just blind. Something cracked in my chest, something that had been holding very still for a very long time. I have an idea, Luca said. The wedding. Let's cancel it. I blinked at him. Not the marriage, just the circus your father's planning. Instead, we go to the courthouse, sign the papers, make it legal and simple. Then, if you want a party, we throw one later, on our terms, with people we actually want there. I typed quickly. My father will lose his mind. Let him. Luca's smile was sharp. He doesn't get to decide this. We do. So what do you say? You want to get married in a courthouse on Saturday and skip all the bullshit? I thought about the dress hanging in my closet, chosen by a stranger. The venue I'd never seen. The guest list full of people I didn't know. The performance of a wedding designed to convince everyone that Richard Cross's daughter was making a good match. Then I thought about Saturday morning, just me and Luca and a judge. Simple, real, mine. Yes. His grin transformed his whole face. Yeah? You're sure? I nodded, typed, but I want Sarah there. And we tell my father the morning of so he can't stop it. You're devious. I like it. He stood, held out his hand. Come on, let's go for a drive. I hesitated, typed, where? Anywhere you want. When's the last time you left this house? I had to think about it. A week? 2? That's what I thought. He kept his hand extended. You're not a prisoner, remember? That was rule number 1. So let's get you out of here for a few hours. I looked at his hand, at the calluses on his palm, the faint scar across his knuckles, at the choice he was offering. Then I took it. We drove with the windows down and no destination in mind. Luca let me control the music, didn't ask questions when I switched songs halfway through, just followed when I pointed at random exits off the highway. We ended up at a beach 2 hours north of Boston, nearly deserted on a Thursday afternoon in early October. I hadn't been to the ocean since before the accident, since before everything changed. We walked along the shoreline in silence, the wind whipping my hair around my face, the sound of waves drowning out every thought. Luca stayed close, but not hovering, his presence solid and reassuring without being overwhelming. When I finally stopped, standing at the edge of the water with the tide rushing over my shoes, he came up beside me. You okay? I nodded, pulled out my phone. Thank you for this. You don't have to thank me. This is what partners do. We're not married yet. Close enough. He was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? And you can tell me to go to hell if I'm overstepping. I typed, ask. What happened to your voice? My hands froze on the screen. I should have expected the question eventually, should have prepared an answer, but somehow I'd let myself believe he wouldn't ask. I started typing, deleted it, started again. Car accident. 13 years ago. My mom was driving. We hit a patch of ice, slid off the road. She died instantly. I was pinned in the passenger seat, broke my ribs, collapsed my lung, fractured my larynx. Doctors said I was lucky to survive. Luca read it, his expression going very still. Lucky. That's what they said. And you screamed, he said quietly. When it happened. When you were trapped. You screamed so hard you destroyed what was left of your vocal cords. I stared at him, typed with shaking hands. How did you know that? Because I've seen that kind of damage before. That's not just an injury. That's trauma written into your body. He turned to face me fully. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry no one helped you find another way to scream. The tears came before I could stop them, silent, hot, unwanted. I wiped at them furiously, embarrassed, but Luca caught my wrist gently. Hey, it's okay. You're allowed to cry. I shook my head, pulled away, typed through blurry vision. I don't cry anymore. Crying is for people who have voices. That's bullshit too. He said it so matter-of-factly that I almost laughed. Evelyn, look at me. I did. You've been silent for 13 years. But that doesn't mean you don't have a voice. It just means the world hasn't been listening hard enough. He stepped closer. I'm listening. I'm going to keep listening. And anyone who doesn't, anyone who treats you like you're invisible or less than, or not worth hearing, they'll learn really fast that they made a mistake. I wiped my eyes, looked at this man who was supposed to be a criminal, a monster, a threat, who instead kept seeing me when everyone else looked away. What if I can't be what you need? What if you already are? We stood there on the beach as the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have made my mother cry with joy. And for the first time in 13 years, I thought maybe, just maybe, I could build something new from the wreckage of what I'd lost. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made everything feel possible. Evelyn woke before dawn, watched the sky shift from black to gray to pale gold through her bedroom window, and tried to convince herself she wasn't making the biggest mistake of her life. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. "Morning? Still with me?" She typed back immediately. "Still with me." "Good. I'll be there at 9. Wear whatever makes you happy." Whatever made her happy. The concept felt foreign, revolutionary. She spent 20 minutes standing in her closet before settling on a simple cream dress she'd bought herself 2 years ago and never had occasion to wear. It fell just below her knees, elegant without trying too hard. She left her hair down, applied minimal makeup, and stared at her reflection like she was meeting a stranger. The woman in the mirror looked terrified, but she also looked alive. At 8:30, she knocked on Sarah's door. Her sister opened it, already dressed, Ben hovering behind her with his keys in hand. "You're really doing this," Sarah said. Not a question. Evelyn nodded, pulled out her phone. "Come with me?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Of course. Someone has to make sure you don't bolt halfway there." "I won't bolt." "I know." Sarah hugged her carefully, mindful of her belly. "You're the bravest person I've ever met. You know that, right?" Evelyn didn't feel brave. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump, with no idea if she'd fly or fall. But she held on to Sarah and tried to absorb some of her sister's certainty. At 8:50, her father's voice echoed up the stairs. "Evelyn, the planner is here. She needs to go over final details for Wednesday." Wednesday. The wedding that wasn't going to happen. Evelyn checked her phone. "I'm outside." Her heart kicked against her ribs. She grabbed her purse, nodded to Sarah and Ben, and headed for the stairs. Her father appeared at the bottom, still in his robe, coffee in hand. "Where are you going? We have appointments today. The final fitting is at noon, and then the—" "She's going out," Sarah said from behind Evelyn, her voice firm. "With me." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Going out where?" "Does it matter?" Ben added, stepping up beside his wife. "She's an adult, Richard. She can leave the house." "The wedding is in 4 days. She doesn't have time to—" The doorbell rang. Evelyn moved past her father before he could stop her, her hands shaking as she reached for the handle. When she pulled it open, Luca stood on the porch in a dark suit that made him look dangerously handsome, holding a small bouquet of white roses. "Morning," he said, his eyes finding hers immediately. Then he looked past her to Richard. "Mr. Cross. Good to see you." "What are you doing here?" Richard's voice had gone tight. "We agreed not to see each other before the wedding. It's bad luck." "Yeah, about that." Luca stepped into the foyer uninvited, and Evelyn noticed 2 men in dark suits taking positions by the cars outside. Security. His or hers, she wasn't sure anymore. "Change of plans." Richard's coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me?" "Evelyn and I are getting married today, at the courthouse. We decided we didn't want the circus." Luca handed the roses to Evelyn, and she took them with numb fingers. "You're welcome to come, but that's up to her." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face went through several colors before settling on an alarming shade of red. "You can't be serious. The venue is booked. The guests are invited. I've spent $200,000 on—" "Yeah, that's your problem, not ours." Luca's tone stayed pleasant, but there was steel underneath. "This is what Evelyn wants. So unless you want to cause a scene in front of your daughters on their sister's wedding day, I suggest you accept it gracefully." "Evelyn," Richard turned to her, his expression pleading. "Tell him this is insane. Tell him we can't just cancel everything. Think of the embarrassment. Think of what people will say." Evelyn looked at her father, at the man who'd spent 2 weeks planning a wedding without asking her opinion once, who'd signed her away like a business asset, who'd made her silence into a weapon he could wield. She pulled out her phone, typed carefully, showed him the screen. "I don't care what people say. I care about what I want. And I want this." "This is that man's influence," Richard hissed. "He's manipulating you, making you think you have choices when really—" "Mr. Cross," Luca's voice cut through the building tirade like a blade. "I'm going to stop you there because you're about to say something that's going to make me forget I'm trying to be civilized. Your daughter has made her choice. You can respect it, or you can stay home. But either way, she's leaving with me in 5 minutes. Sarah appeared at Evelyn's elbow, Ben right behind her. We're coming too, Sarah announced, as witnesses. This is unacceptable, Richard said, but the fight was draining out of him, replaced by something that looked like panic. The Valentinos expect a public display, a society wedding. That was part of the arrangement. The Valentinos will get what they need, a legal marriage that ties our families together. Luca adjusted his cuffs, the gesture casual but somehow threatening. What they won't get is control over how that happens. That's between me and Evelyn. He offered Evelyn his arm. She stared at it for a moment, then at the roses in her hands, then at Sarah's encouraging nod. Finally, she tucked the flowers into the crook of her elbow and slipped her hand through Luca's arm. His smile was small but genuine. Ready? She nodded. They walked past her father together, past the wedding planner who stood frozen in the doorway with a binder full of useless details, past the life Evelyn had been suffocating in for 13 years. When they reached Luca's car, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than most people's houses, he opened the door for her himself. You okay? He asked quietly, before she got in. She pulled out her phone. Ask me after. Fair enough. The drive to the courthouse took 40 minutes through Saturday morning traffic. Luca drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on the console between them, close enough that she could touch it if she wanted. Sarah and Ben followed in their own car, and the security detail brought up the rear in an SUV with tinted windows. You know you can still change your mind, Luca said as they merged onto the highway, right up until the judge asks if you consent. Evelyn typed without looking at him. I know. And you know this isn't about the debt anymore, not for me. She did look at him then. He kept his eyes on the road, but his jaw was tight. I'm not good at this, he continued. Feelings and words and all that. I'm better with actions. But I need you to know. I'm doing this because I want to, not because I have to. You get me? She typed. I get you. Good. He glanced at her briefly, his expression softening. Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to screw this up 100 different ways, and I need you to call me on it when I do. Why would you screw it up? Because I don't know how to be married. Don't know how to share space or compromise or think about someone else before I make decisions. I've been alone a long time, built walls a long time, and you're asking me to take them down. She thought about that, about her own walls built from silence and survival, about what it would mean to let someone in. Then we learned together. His hand moved from the console to hers, threading their fingers together. Yeah, we do. They didn't let go until they reached the courthouse. The building was older, all marble and high ceilings, and the kind of quiet that came with institutional authority. A clerk directed them to the third floor, where a tired-looking judge named Patricia Morrison reviewed their paperwork with the enthusiasm of someone processing their 100th marriage that month. Any objections to this union? She asked, sounding like she was reading from a script. Sarah and Ben shook their heads. Evelyn's phone stayed in her purse. Luca said, No, Your Honor. Rings? Luca produced a small box from his jacket pocket. Inside were 2 simple platinum bands, elegant and understated. He'd somehow gotten her size right. These work? He asked Evelyn, and she realized he was genuinely asking, giving her an out even now. She nodded, took the smaller ring and held it carefully. Judge Morrison went through the vows with practiced efficiency, skipping the traditional phrasing at Luca's request. Do you, Luca Moretti, take Evelyn Cross to be your lawfully wedded wife, to stand beside her in partnership and respect, for as long as you both shall choose? I do. And do you, Evelyn Cross, take Luca Moretti to be your lawfully wedded husband, to stand beside him in partnership and respect, for as long as you both shall choose? Evelyn pulled out her phone with shaking hands, typed 3 words, showed them to the judge. I do. Judge Morrison smiled, the first genuine expression Evelyn had seen from her. Close enough. By the power vested in me by the state, I pronounce you married. You may kiss if you'd like. Or not. I'm not the boss of you. Luca turned to Evelyn, raised an eyebrow in question. She hesitated, then stepped closer, went up on her toes, pressed a brief, chaste kiss to his cheek. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Thank you, he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. For choosing this. For choosing me. Sarah was crying. Ben was grinning. The security detail in the hallway probably heard everything. And Evelyn felt something shift in her chest, something that felt like the beginning of freedom. They signed the license, made it legal, became Mr. and Mrs. Moretti in the eyes of the law and society and everyone who'd tried to control them. In the hallway after, Sarah hugged Evelyn so tight she couldn't breathe. "You did it. You actually did it." "We did it." "What now?" Ben asked, shaking Luca's hand with more warmth than Evelyn expected. "Now," Luca said, "we go home." Home. The word felt strange in her mouth, on her tongue, in her head. She'd lived in the same house for 26 years, but it had never really been home. Just a place where she existed, where she survived. Maybe home was something you built, not something you were born into. The car ride to Luca's place, their place now, she supposed, took them through parts of the city Evelyn barely recognized. They ended up in the Seaport District, at a modern high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman who nodded respectfully as they entered. "Penthouse," Luca explained as they rode the elevator up. "I bought the whole floor about 3 years ago. Renovated it myself. Well, hired people who knew what they were doing, but I picked everything out. It's got space, privacy, good security." He glanced at her. "And before you worry, you've got your own room, your own bathroom, your own everything. This isn't about me pushing expectations." The elevator opened directly into the apartment, and Evelyn stepped out into the most beautiful space she'd ever seen. All clean lines and natural light, with views of the harbor that stretched for miles. The furniture was minimal but expensive. The art on the walls actually interesting. The whole place designed for someone who appreciated quality but not excess. "Kitchen's through there," Luca pointed. "Office is down that hall. Your room is this way." He led her through the living room to a wing she assumed was private, opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was easily twice the size of her old one, decorated in soft grays and whites, with another wall of windows looking out at the water. "I took a guess on what you'd like," he said, sounding almost nervous. "But if it's wrong, we can change it. Paint, furniture, whatever." Evelyn walked to the window, stared out at the boats in the harbor, the seagulls circling, the vast openness of it all. She pulled out her phone. "It's perfect." "Yeah?" He came to stand beside her, hands in his pockets. "Good. That's good." A pause. "You hungry? I can order something. Or there's food in the kitchen if you want to." She turned to face him, cutting off his rambling. He looked different here, in his own space. Less guarded, more human. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," he admitted. "I just married a woman I barely know. Brought her to my home, promised to be a partner when I don't even know what that means." He rubbed the back of his neck. "So yeah, little bit nervous." "Me too." "That makes me feel better, actually." She almost smiled, typed, "What happens now?" "Now?" He considered. "Now we figure it out. Take it day by day. You unpack. I had some of your things brought over. Hope that's okay. We eat lunch, we talk, or don't talk. Whatever feels right." He met her eyes. "There's no rule book for this, Evelyn. We make it up as we go." "That sounds terrifying." "Yeah, it does." He grinned. "But also kind of exciting, right?" Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression shifted, hardening into something colder, more dangerous. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked from the doorway. She and Ben had followed them up, were standing in the living room looking uncertain about whether they should leave. "Your father's calling an emergency meeting with the Valentinos," Luca said, his attention still on his phone. Apparently he's trying to void the marriage on grounds that Evelyn was coerced. Ice flooded Evelyn's veins. She grabbed Luca's arm, typed frantically on her phone. "Can he do that?" "He can try." Luca's jaw tightened. "But he won't succeed. We have witnesses, documentation, and more importantly, we have leverage he doesn't know about." "What kind of leverage?" Ben asked. Luca looked at Evelyn. "How much do you know about your father's business dealings?" She shrugged, typed, "Not much. He kept me away from it." "Yeah, I bet he did." Luca pocketed his phone. "Here's the truth. Your father didn't just borrow money from the Valentinos. He laundered money for them. For 3 years. Through his real estate holdings. When the FBI started sniffing around, he panicked and tried to pull out. That's why they wanted blood. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. Dad's a criminal? Dad's desperate, Luca corrected, and stupid. The Valentinos don't forgive easily. The only reason they accepted this marriage deal is because my family has connections they need. But if Richard thinks he can renegotiate now, they'll kill him, Evelyn typed. And Sarah. Probably. Luca said it flatly, without emotion. Which is why we need to handle this now, before it escalates. How? Ben demanded. Luca pulled out his phone again, made a call. Marco, get the files on Richard Cross. Everything we pulled from the FBI contact. Yeah, all of it. He listened. No, I want hard copies. Bring them to the Valentino meeting tonight. Another pause. Because I'm going to give Richard Cross a choice. Accept this marriage and walk away clean, or fight it and watch his entire empire burn. He hung up, turned back to them. Sorry, this isn't how I wanted your first day to go. Evelyn grabbed his arm, pulled him around to face her, typed rapidly. You're blackmailing my father? I'm protecting my wife. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Your father made his choices a long time ago. Now he has to live with them. But he doesn't get to drag you down with him. What if he tells everyone I was coerced? Then I'll tell everyone he's a money launderer facing federal charges. And I'll make sure the evidence lands in the right hands. Luca's expression softened. I know he's your father. I know that makes this complicated, but you need to understand something. I don't make idle threats. If Richard tries to undo this marriage, I will destroy him. Completely. Not because I want to, but because that's how this world works. You come at mine, I come at yours 10 times harder. Sarah made a small sound. Ben pulled her close. Evelyn stared at Luca, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the man who'd offered her choices and respected her silence, but the criminal, the killer, the one who'd built an empire on violence and fear. This was who she'd married. This was the reality. I need to think. Okay. He stepped back immediately, giving her space. Take all the time you need. I have to go deal with this meeting. Should be back by 8, 9 at the latest. He looked at Sarah. You and Ben should stay here tonight. I'll have rooms prepared. Security will be around, but they won't bother you. Luca, Sarah said quietly. Don't hurt him. Please. He's still our father. I won't lay a hand on him. Luca's smile was sharp. I don't need to. The truth is weapon enough. He left in a swirl of expensive suit and barely contained fury, and the apartment felt suddenly too large, too empty, too real. Sarah sank onto the couch. What have we gotten ourselves into? Ben sat beside her, rubbing her back. Nothing we can't handle. But Evelyn wasn't sure that was true. She'd thought she understood what marrying Luca meant, thought she'd made peace with his violence, his past, his world. But understanding it intellectually and watching him weaponize information against her father were two very different things. She went to her new bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the bed that was too soft and too big and too unfamiliar. Pulled out her phone and stared at the blank screen. Outside, the sun was setting over the harbor, painting everything gold and red, beautiful and violent like everything else in her new life. Her phone buzzed. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I meant what I said. I protect what's mine. That includes you, always, even from your own family. She typed back before she could stop herself. What if I don't want to be protected? What if I just want to be free? The response came immediately. Then I'll spend every day proving you can have both. She didn't answer, just held the phone and watched the sunset and wondered if she'd made the right choice or the worst mistake of her life. 3 hours later, her phone rang, Luca's name on the screen. She answered. Hey. He sounded tired. Meeting's done. Your father agreed to back off. Issued a statement saying the courthouse wedding was a mutual decision, romantic and spontaneous. He's going to quietly cancel the other venue, blame it on changing plans. A pause. You still awake? She typed, yes. Can I come home, or do you need more space? She thought about it, about the man who'd blackmailed her father to protect her, who'd offered her freedom while building a cage of safety around her, who was dangerous and gentle and impossible to categorize. Come home. Okay, I'm 10 minutes away. Fair warning, I'm exhausted and probably not great company right now. I don't need you to be great company. I just need you to be honest. I can do honest. When he walked through the door 20 minutes later, he looked like he'd aged 5 years. His tie was loosened, his jacket gone, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He dropped his keys on the entry table and met her eyes across the living room. "Your father's scared," he said without preamble. Really scared. The FBI has enough to indict him on multiple charges. He was looking at 20 years minimum. The only thing keeping him free is me. I made a deal. The evidence disappears. He gets to retire quietly, move to Florida or wherever, live out his days playing golf. But he stays away from you, from Sarah, from this family. Evelyn pulled out her phone. "You bought my father's freedom." "I bought your peace." He moved closer, stopping a careful distance away. "I told you, I'm not a good man. I don't play fair. I use whatever leverage I have to get what I want. And what I want is for you to never have to worry about him using you again. So now I'm using you. No. Now we're partners." He sat down on the couch, looking more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "Look, I get it if you want out. If this is too much, I'll make sure you and Sarah are protected regardless. But I need you to understand something. This is who I am. The man who makes hard choices and lives with the consequences. I can't be someone else for you." She sat beside him. Not too close, but close enough that their knees almost touched. Started typing. "I don't want you to be someone else. I just need to know, where's the line? When does protection become control?" He read it carefully. "That's a fair question. The line is you. You tell me when I've crossed it, and I stop. No arguments, no justifications. Your word is the line." What if I can't always tell you? What if I freeze or shut down or can't find the words? Then we figure out other signals. A text, a gesture, whatever works. He looked at her directly. "I'm not your father, Evelyn. I'm not going to use your silence against you. If anything, it makes me try harder to understand." She believed him. Against all logic and reason, she believed him. "Okay." "Okay?" He sounded surprised. "That's it?" She typed faster. "That's it. But I have conditions. You teach me about your world. No secrets. No protecting me from information I should know. If I'm going to be your partner, I need to actually be your partner. Equal access." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, genuine and almost relieved. "Deal. Starting tomorrow, you learn everything. The business, the people, the risks, all of it. And I want to keep working, teaching sign language. I'm not going to be some trophy wife who sits at home." "Didn't expect you to be." He held out his hand. "Anything else?" She shook it, feeling the calluses and scars under her palm. "Yes. You let me help you, whatever that means. When you're tired or angry or don't know what to do, you don't pretend everything's fine." "That one's harder for me." "I know, but that's the deal." His grip tightened on her hand. "You drive a hard bargain, Mrs. Moretti." She pulled out her phone with her free hand, typed one-handed. "Get used to it." They sat like that for a while, holding hands in the living room of an apartment that was starting to feel like it could become home. Outside, the city glittered with a million lights, each one a life being lived, a choice being made, a future being written. Sarah appeared from the guest room, took one look at them, and smiled. "You two figure it out?" "Working on it," Luca said. "Good." She waddled over, kissed Evelyn's forehead. "I'm going to bed. Wake me if you need anything." After she left, Luca stood, pulling Evelyn up with him. "You should sleep too. It's been a long day." She nodded, started toward her room, then paused, turned back. Luca stood in the middle of the living room, hands in his pockets, looking lost in his own space. She walked back to him, went up on her toes, kissed him properly this time. Not chaste, not brief, a real kiss that said thank you, and I'm scared, and maybe this could work. When she pulled back, his eyes were dark and surprised. "What was that for?" She showed him her phone. "For keeping your promises. For seeing me. For being honest, even when it's hard." "Evelyn." He said her name like a prayer, like a promise, like something precious. "I'm going to screw this up, probably a lot, but I'm going to try, every day, to be worthy of you. You already are." She left him standing there and went to her room, closed the door, and finally let herself breathe. Let herself feel the enormity of what she'd done, who she'd become. She was married to a criminal, a killer, a man who'd blackmailed her father and threatened her old life and promised her a new one built on violence and respect. And somehow, impossibly, she thought she might be okay with that. Her phone buzzed one more time. "Good night, wife. Thanks for not running." She smiled and typed back, "Good night, husband. Thanks for not letting me." The first week of marriage passed in a strange blur of normalcy, punctuated by moments that reminded Evelyn exactly whose world she'd entered. Luca kept his promise about transparency, which meant she sat in on business meetings conducted in Italian and English, watched money change hands in amounts that made her head spin, and learned to recognize the difference between legitimate associates and the ones who still dealt in things that would never see daylight. "That's Marco," Luca explained over breakfast on Wednesday, showing her photos on his tablet. "My second. Known him since we were kids. Loyal to a fault? Probably too loyal. He'd take a bullet for me without thinking, which is why I have to think for both of us sometimes." Evelyn studied the photo of a broad-shouldered man with kind eyes and scarred knuckles. Typed, "Does he know about me?" "Everyone knows about you." Luca refilled her coffee without asking, something he'd started doing after noticing she drank 3 cups every morning. "You're the talk of every family from here to Chicago. Luca Moretti got married without fanfare, without permission, without politics. They're either impressed or insulted, depending on who you ask." "Which are you hoping for?" "Neither. I'm hoping they're smart enough to leave you alone." But by Thursday, it became clear that not everyone was that smart. The first threat came via text to Luca's phone while they were having lunch. He read it, his expression going carefully blank, then excused himself to make a call. Evelyn watched through the glass walls of his office as his posture shifted from businessman to something harder, more dangerous. When he came back 20 minutes later, his jaw was tight. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked. She and Ben had stayed through the week, partly for support, and partly because Luca's penthouse had better security than their apartment in Cambridge. "Nothing that won't be handled." Luca sat back down but didn't touch his food. "Someone made a comment about Evelyn at a meeting this morning. Implied she was a weakness I couldn't afford." "Who?" Ben demanded. "Doesn't matter. They've been corrected." The way he said corrected made Evelyn's stomach clench. She pulled out her phone. "What did you do?" Luca looked at her steadily. "I made it clear that anyone who threatens you, insults you, or treats you as anything less than my equal will answer to me personally. And I made sure that message reached everyone who needs to hear it." "By doing what?" His pause told her everything. "By reminding them what I'm capable of when someone crosses a line." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. Ben looked like he wanted to ask more questions but didn't dare. And Evelyn felt the weight of her choice settle more firmly on her shoulders. This was the reality she'd signed up for. Protection that came with a body count. She typed slowly. "Did you kill someone?" "No." Luca's answer was immediate. "But I hurt someone. Badly enough that they'll remember it. And I'm not going to apologize for that, because they earned it." "What did they say about me?" "Nothing worth repeating." She stood up, phone in hand, and left the table. Made it to her bedroom before the shaking started. Sat on the edge of the bed and tried to reconcile the man who'd held her hand on the beach with the one who'd just admitted to violence on her behalf. A knock on the door. "Evelyn?" Luca's voice, careful. "Can I come in?" She didn't answer, but she didn't lock the door either. He took that as permission, entering slowly like he was approaching something wild and fragile. "Talk to me," he said, sitting in the chair by the window instead of the bed, keeping distance. "Tell me what you're thinking." She typed for a long time before showing him. "I knew who you were when I married you. I knew about the violence, but knowing it and seeing it are different things. And I don't know how to feel about being the reason someone got hurt. You're not the reason. Their disrespect is the reason." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I get it. This is new for you. Everything about this world is new, and I'm asking you to accept things that would make most people run. Are you going to do this every time someone says something mean about me? Depends on what they say and who they are." He didn't sugarcoat it. "A stranger on the street? No. Someone in my organization who should know better? Yeah. Probably. Because in this world, respect is currency. If I let people disrespect you, it's not just about you. It's about whether I can protect what's mine, whether I'm strong enough to keep my position. So I'm a political statement. You're my wife. He said it firmly. Everything else is secondary. She wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that the violence was necessity and not preference, protection and not possession. But she'd lived with a man who'd hidden cruelty behind justifications before. Her father had excelled at making his selfishness sound like sacrifice. How do I know you're not just like him? Luca went very still. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Like who? My father. Using me. Controlling me. Just in different ways. He stood up, moved to the window, stared out at the harbor. The silence stretched so long she thought he might not answer. Then he turned back to face her. You don't know, he said. Not for sure. Not yet. That's the truth. You can't know if I'm different until time proves it. Until you see me make choices that cost me something to keep you free. He crossed his arms. But here's what I can tell you. Your father treated your silence like a flaw that made you easy to manage. I treat it like a language I need to learn. Your father used your love for Sarah as leverage. I protected Sarah because you asked me to, not because it gave me power over you. Your father planned a wedding that was about his image. I married you in a courthouse because it was about us. That could all be manipulation too. It could be, he agreed. I'm good at manipulation. It's how I've survived this long. But Evelyn, if I wanted to control you, there are easier ways. I could isolate you from Sarah. Monitor your phone, control your money. Make you dependent on me for everything. I'm not doing any of that. In fact, I'm doing the opposite. I'm giving you access, information, freedom. Because I meant what I said. I want a partner, not a prisoner. She looked down at her phone, at the conversation they were having, at the fact that he'd never once tried to take it from her or limit who she talked to or what she said, at the fact that he was arguing with her instead of just demanding obedience. I need time to figure this out. Take all the time you need. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm figuring this out too. I've never had to explain my choices before. Never had to justify my actions to anyone. It's uncomfortable as hell, but I'm doing it because you deserve to understand the world you're living in now. After he left, Evelyn sat with her thoughts and her phone and the complicated reality of her marriage. Eventually, she texted Sarah. Am I crazy for staying? Sarah's response came quickly. I don't know, maybe, but I also see the way he looks at you, like you're something precious he's afraid of breaking. Dad never looked at anyone like that. That doesn't mean he won't break me anyway. No, but it means he'll care if he does. Evelyn wasn't sure if that was comforting or terrifying. That night, Luca knocked on her door around 10. When she opened it, he was holding a file folder. This is everyone I do business with, he said. Names, photos, what they do, how dangerous they are. I want you to memorize them. Know who to trust and who to avoid. Know who might try to use you to get to me. He handed her the folder. And this. He gave her a phone, different from her regular one, sleeker and clearly expensive. Panic button is the red app. Press it, and my security team responds in under 3 minutes. GPS is always on, always monitored. If anything happens, if you're ever in danger, this gets me to you. She took both items, feeling their weight. You think something's going to happen. I think people are unpredictable when power shifts, and me getting married shifted power. He rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference. Is there? Yeah, scaring you would be keeping you ignorant so you'd stay close. Preparing you means I trust you to handle the truth and make smart choices. He met her eyes. I trust you, Evelyn, even though we barely know each other, even though you have every reason not to trust me back. I'm trusting you with my life by bringing you into this world. Something shifted in her chest. She pulled out her regular phone. Show me how to use the panic button. He did. Walked her through every feature, made her practice activating and deactivating it, showed her the response protocol. Then he sat on her bedroom floor while she went through the file, asking questions via text that he answered with patience and detail. That's Vincent Calabresi, he said when she pointed to a photo. Runs the north side. Old school, traditional, doesn't trust anyone under 40. He voted against our marriage because he thinks I'm too young to lead, but he's honorable. Won't come at you directly. And him? She pointed to a thin man with cold eyes. Tommy Ricci, enforcer. Does the jobs no one else wants. He's loyal to money, not people. Dangerous if pointed in your direction. But he works for the Valentino family, and they're bound by the marriage agreement, so he's a threat, but a managed one. They went through 30 more faces, some friendly, some neutral, some openly hostile in their photographed expressions. By midnight, Evelyn's head was spinning with information. Enough for tonight, Luca said, standing and stretching. You'll meet most of them Saturday. She looked up sharply. Saturday? The charity gala. It's been on the calendar for months. All the families attend. It's where we make nice and pretend we're legitimate businessmen instead of criminals in expensive suits. He caught her expression. I know this is fast. But hiding you doesn't help either of us. People need to see that you're real, that this marriage is real, that I'm serious about protecting you. I don't know how to navigate that world. Good news? Neither do half the people there. They're just better at faking it. He smiled slightly. I'll be with you the whole time. You don't have to talk, just be present. Let them see you. That's enough. What if it's not enough? What if someone, then I handle it. Simple. Final. Evelyn, look at me. She did. Saturday is going to be uncomfortable, probably scary, definitely overwhelming. But you're not alone. Marco will be there. 3 security guards, me, and if at any point you want to leave, we leave. No questions. Your comfort matters more than politics. She wanted to argue, to say she'd tough it out, to prove she could handle his world. But the truth was, she was terrified. She pulled out her phone. What do I wear? His expression softened. Whatever makes you feel strong. The next morning, a stylist appeared at the penthouse with racks of dresses, all in her size, all beautiful and expensive and completely overwhelming. Sarah, 7 days away from her due date and moving like a beached whale by her own description, supervised with the enthusiasm of someone living vicariously through her sister's sudden wealth. That one, Sarah said, pointing to a deep emerald green dress that looked like liquid silk. Try that one. Evelyn did. The dress fit like it had been made for her, emphasizing curves she usually hid, making her look elegant and dangerous and not at all like someone who could be dismissed. Perfect, the stylist declared. Very Mrs. Moretti. The name still felt strange, foreign, like playing dress-up in someone else's life. But when Luca came home that evening and saw her standing in the living room wearing the dress, his expression made something warm unfurl in her chest. Wow, he said, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, you look... That's... He stopped. Started again. You're going to be the most beautiful woman there, she typed quickly. You're biased. Extremely. Doesn't make it less true, Sarah laughed from the couch. You two are disgustingly cute. It's offensive to those of us who've been married for years and mostly argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash. We argue, Luca said, just differently. Arguing implies both people can talk back, Sarah pointed out. Trust me, Luca said, glancing at Evelyn with something that looked like fondness. She talks back plenty. That night, Evelyn dreamed of the gala, of walking into a room full of people who knew her husband's secrets and her father's crimes and her own silence, of being stared at, judged, measured against standards she didn't understand, of failing some invisible test and watching Luca's empire crumble because she wasn't enough. She woke up at 3 a.m., heart pounding, and found Luca sitting in the living room with his laptop, working despite the hour. He looked up when she appeared. Can't sleep? She shook her head. Me neither. Come here. He patted the couch beside him. When she sat, he angled the screen so she could see. I'm looking at property downtown, thinking about opening a community center, something that gives back, makes this city better instead of just taking from it. She leaned closer, reading the proposals. Typed, why? Because you asked me how you'd know I'm not like your father. This is how. Your father took, I want to build. He hid behind respectability while doing dirty things. I want to actually become respectable by doing clean things. He closed the laptop. And because you make me want to be better, which is uncomfortable and annoying and probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. I didn't ask you to change. No, you asked me to be honest. And honestly, I was getting bored with the same old patterns. You're the best excuse I've had in years to try something different. She studied his face in the dim light from the city outside. The tired lines around his eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw, the way his hair fell across his forehead. He looked human, vulnerable, real. She reached out, touched his hand where it rested on the laptop. He looked down at their joined fingers, then back at her face. You're going to be fine on Saturday, he said quietly. Better than fine. You're going to walk in there and remind everyone why I chose you, why you're exactly where you're supposed to be. How can you be so sure? Because I've watched you survive impossible things with grace. A gala full of judgy criminals is nothing compared to 13 years of silence. She wanted to believe him, wanted to absorb his confidence and make it her own. Instead, she just held his hand and let the city lights blur through the windows. Saturday arrived with brutal clarity. Evelyn spent the morning being pampered by a team of stylists who did her hair, makeup, and nails with professional efficiency. Sarah supervised from a chair, offering commentary and encouragement in equal measure. You look like a movie star, Sarah declared when they were done. One of those old Hollywood ones who didn't need to talk because their presence said everything. Evelyn smiled, but her stomach was in knots. The dress felt too revealing, the heels too high, the makeup too obvious. She looked like someone trying to be something she wasn't. Luca appeared at 6, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. He looked devastating and dangerous and completely at ease in his own skin. Ready? He asked. She nodded, lying with her body language. He saw through it, crossed the room, took her hands. Last chance. We can skip this. Order pizza, watch bad movies, pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist. She pulled out her phone. No, we go. I need to do this. Why? Because I'm tired of being afraid. Because if I'm going to be your wife, I need to actually be your wife. Not just in name. He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Okay, but the second you want out, you tell me. Deal? Deal. The gala was being held at a historic hotel downtown, the kind with marble columns and crystal chandeliers and the weight of old money in every polished surface. They arrived fashionably late, which Luca explained was strategic. Let them wait, he said as they pulled up to the entrance. Let them wonder. Makes the entrance more effective. Marco met them at the door, looking uncomfortable in a suit. Boss, Mrs. Moretti. He nodded to Evelyn with respect. Security's in place. No surprises so far. Good. Keep it that way. They walked in together, Luca's hand firm at the small of her back, and Evelyn felt every eye in the room turn toward them. The conversations didn't stop, but they changed, became quieter, more speculative. People stared without shame, taking in her dress, her face, the way Luca stood close but not possessive. Mr. Moretti, an older man approached, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. Congratulations on your marriage. Vincent. Luca shook his hand. Thank you. This is my wife, Evelyn. Vincent's gaze swept over her, assessing. Pleasure, Mrs. Moretti. I knew your father. Good man. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she managed a polite nod. Was he? Luca's tone stayed pleasant, but there was an edge underneath. I'm less familiar with his reputation. Vincent's eyes narrowed slightly. I see. Well, enjoy the evening. He moved away, and Luca's hand pressed more firmly against Evelyn's back. You okay? He murmured. She nodded, but her heart was racing. The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, each one more uncomfortable than the last. She smiled, nodded, let Luca do the talking while men and women in expensive clothes sized her up like a prize cow. She doesn't talk much, does she? Someone commented within earshot. How convenient for you, Moretti. A wife who can't argue back. Luca's expression went cold. My wife communicates just fine. She just doesn't waste words on people who aren't worth them. The woman who'd spoken flushed red and disappeared into the crowd. By the time they reached the ballroom, Evelyn's composure was fraying. Too many eyes, too many whispers, too much judgment wrapped in polite smiles. You need air? Luca asked. She started to nod, but then she saw him. Her father. standing near the bar with a drink in hand, talking to a woman Evelyn didn't recognize. He looked older than she remembered, more worn, the weight of his mistakes showing in the set of his shoulders. Their eyes met across the room. Richard Cross went pale, started to approach, but Luca stepped smoothly between them. "Not tonight, Richard. You made your agreement. Stick to it." "I just want to talk to my daughter." "Your daughter doesn't want to talk to you." Luca's voice stayed low, but the threat was clear. "You lost that right when you sold her." "I was protecting her." "You were protecting yourself. We both know it. So do us all a favor and keep your distance." Richard looked past Luca to Evelyn, his expression desperate. "Evelyn, please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm still your father. I still love you." She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, typed, showed it to him without letting Luca see first. "You stopped being my father the day you treated me like property. Stay away from me and Sarah. That's the only thing I want from you." Richard read it, his face crumpling. For a moment, Evelyn felt a twist of guilt, of old loyalty and buried love. Then she remembered 13 years of being invisible, of her voice being used against her, of being signed away like a business contract. The guilt evaporated. "Come on," Luca said quietly, taking her elbow. "Let's get you that air." They made it to the terrace before the gunfire started. The first shot shattered a window, sending glass raining down on the dance floor. People screamed, dove for cover, chaos erupting in seconds. Luca had Evelyn on the ground before she could process what was happening, his body covering hers, Marco appearing from nowhere to help shield them. "Stay down," Luca ordered. More shots, shouting, the sound of breaking glass and running feet. Evelyn's ears rang, her heart slammed against her ribs. This was real. This was happening. Someone was shooting at them at a charity gala in a room full of criminals and their families. "Marco, get her out," Luca said, starting to move. But Evelyn grabbed his jacket, held on, pulled out her phone with her other hand, typed frantically. "Don't leave me." "I have to." "No, please, don't leave me." His expression warred with itself, duty versus desire, protection versus presence. Then he cursed in Italian and pulled her closer. "Marco, on us. We move together." They made it to a service corridor, 3 other couples and a handful of security personnel following. Someone was crying, someone else was on the phone with the police. And Evelyn couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop seeing the window explode, couldn't stop imagining what would have happened if Luca had been standing 3 feet to the left. "Who was it?" someone demanded. "Who did this?" "Valentino's," Marco said grimly. "Has to be. They're the only ones stupid enough." "They're bound by the marriage agreement," another man argued. "They wouldn't unless they want to void it," Luca finished. His arm was still around Evelyn, keeping her close. "Unless this was a message that they don't accept the terms." "So what do we do?" Luca looked down at Evelyn, and she saw something shift in his expression, something dark and final and absolutely ruthless. "We send a message back, one they can't ignore." The ride back to the penthouse happened in tense silence, 3 security vehicles forming a convoy around Luca's car. Evelyn sat rigid in the passenger seat, still feeling the phantom weight of his body covering hers, still hearing the crack of gunfire echoing in her skull. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Luca kept glancing over at her, his jaw tight, one hand on the wheel and the other reaching across to rest on her knee. Not possessive, just present, grounding. When they finally made it inside, Marco and 2 other guards swept the apartment while Luca kept Evelyn in the foyer, his hands on her shoulders searching her face. "You hurt?" he asked, for the 3rd time since they'd left the hotel. She shook her head, pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. "I'm fine. Just shaken." "You're not fine. You almost got killed tonight." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. "This is exactly what I was trying to prevent. What I promised wouldn't happen. It's not your fault." "The hell it isn't." He released her, paced away, ran both hands through his hair. "I brought you into this world. I knew the risks. I should have had better security, should have anticipated that someone would try something at a public event, should have—" "Boss." Marco emerged from the hallway. "Clear. No signs of breach." "Good. Double the guards on rotation. I want eyes on every entrance, every floor, every goddamn window. No one gets in or out without my knowing about it." "Already done. And I've got calls out to our contacts. Should have confirmation on who ordered the hit by morning. It was the Valentinos, Luca said flatly. Had to be. Maybe, Marco looked uncomfortable. Or maybe someone's trying to make it look like the Valentinos. Frame them for breaking the agreement. Luca stopped pacing. Who would benefit from that? Anyone who wants a war. Anyone who thinks they can move up if our families destroy each other. Marco crossed his arms. Could be internal, could be external. Hell, could be the Calabrese family trying to position themselves as peacemakers and take over in the chaos. Find out. Luca's tone left no room for argument. I want names by tomorrow night, and I want our people ready. If this is war, we don't wait for the next shot. Marco nodded and left, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. Luca stood in the middle of the living room looking like a man barely holding himself together. Then he turned back to Evelyn, and his expression shifted to something more vulnerable. You should be screaming at me right now, he said quietly, telling me I'm insane, that you want out, that this isn't what you signed up for. She typed quickly. I knew what I was signing up for. You told me your world was dangerous. Knowing it and living through someone shooting at you are different things. Yes, they are. She paused, then continued typing. But I'm still here. I'm not running. Why not? He sounded genuinely confused. Evelyn, I almost got you killed tonight. Any sane person would be packing their bags. She thought about how to explain it, about the rush of adrenaline when he'd covered her body with his, choosing her safety over his own without hesitation. About watching him coordinate an evacuation while keeping her close, never once treating her like dead weight or a liability. About the way his hands had shaken slightly when he'd checked her for injuries in the car, betraying the fear he'd tried to hide. Because when the shots started, you didn't run. You didn't save yourself. You protected me first. That means something. That's basic human decency. No, that's love. She typed it before she could stop herself, then stared at the screen in horror. Too much. Too soon. Too revealing. But Luca had already read it. He went very still, his eyes locked on her phone, then her face. Evelyn, he said, and there was something raw in his voice that made her chest ache. I'm not good at this. The emotional stuff, the saying what I feel. But tonight, when those shots started, the only thing I could think was that if something happened to you, if I lost you, I wouldn't survive it. And we've only been married 2 weeks. That shouldn't be possible. But somehow you've become the most important thing in my life, and I don't know what to do with that. She walked to him, closed the distance between them, stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body. Then she went up on her toes and kissed him. Not gentle, not questioning. A claiming kiss that said everything her voice couldn't. He responded instantly, his arms coming around her, pulling her flush against him. The kiss deepened, turned desperate, 13 years of her silence, and his isolation and both their fears pouring into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. Tell me you're sure, he murmured. Tell me this is what you want. Because if we cross this line, I don't think I can go back to separate rooms and polite distance. She pulled out her phone, typed with one hand while the other stayed fisted in his shirt. I'm sure. I want this. I want you. He kissed her again, slower this time, tender in a way that made her throat tight. Then he swept her up, literally lifted her off her feet, and carried her toward his bedroom. She would have laughed at the romance novel cliché of it if she hadn't been too busy holding on and trying not to think about what came next. His room was larger than hers, dominated by a massive bed and the same floor-to-ceiling windows that seemed to be his preference throughout the apartment. He set her down carefully on the edge of the bed, then stepped back. We can stop, he said, even though his breathing was uneven and his pupils blown wide. Anytime. Just, I need you to be able to tell me. Need you to have a way to say no if you change your mind. She thought about it, then grabbed her phone from where she'd dropped it on the nightstand, showed him the screen where she'd typed a single word. Red. Red means stop? She nodded, typed more. Red means stop immediately. Yellow means slow down. Green means keep going. Like a traffic light. His smile was shaky. I can work with that. What's your color right now? She didn't hesitate. Green. What followed was clumsy and intense, and nothing like the movies made it seem. There was awkward fumbling with zippers and hooks, nervous laughter when her heel got caught in the dress, a moment of panic when she couldn't get her phone and almost couldn't signal him. But there was also tenderness in the way he touched her scars, the ones on her throat from the accident and the ones on her soul from everything after. There was patience when she needed to slow down, needed to remember she could trust him with this. And there was connection, real and raw and absolutely terrifying in its intensity. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets with the city lights painting patterns across their skin, Evelyn felt more exposed than she had in 13 years. Not physically, though that too, but emotionally, like she'd handed him every weapon that could destroy her and trusted he wouldn't use them. "You okay?" Luca asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. She reached for her phone on the nightstand. "Better than okay. That was... yeah." He pressed a kiss to her temple. It was. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, both processing what had just shifted between them. Then Luca's phone buzzed on his nightstand, shattering the peace. He grabbed it, read the message, and went rigid. "What's wrong?" Evelyn pulled herself up, clutching the sheet to her chest. Marco found something. His voice had gone flat, emotionless. The shooter wasn't Valentino. He was hired by someone else. Someone who wants both our families at war. "Who?" "Your father." The words hit like a physical blow. Evelyn stared at him, certain she'd misunderstood. She grabbed her phone, typed frantically. "That's impossible. He wouldn't." "He would." And he did. Luca sat up, already pulling away from her physically and emotionally. Apparently Richard decided that if he couldn't control you through marriage, he'd destroy the marriage instead. Start a war, get me killed, and swoop in as the grieving father to reclaim his daughter. No, that can't be right. He's my father. He wouldn't try to kill people just to... To what? Get his power back? Eliminate the threat I pose to his reputation? Luca stood, started dressing with sharp, angry movements. "Evelyn, your father is not who you think he is. He's a coward and a manipulator who's willing to murder innocent people to serve his agenda." She wanted to argue, wanted to defend the man who'd raised her, who'd held her after the accident, who'd loved her mother. But the evidence was there in the cold facts Luca was describing, in the message on his phone, in the reality she'd been trying not to see for years. Her father had sold her to save himself, and when that hadn't given him what he wanted, he'd tried to destroy everything rather than accept his loss of control. She typed through tears she didn't remember starting to cry. "What are you going to do?" Luca paused in buttoning his shirt, looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "What do you think I'm going to do?" "You're going to kill him." "He tried to kill you tonight. He hired a shooter who opened fire in a room full of people, including pregnant women and children, because he wanted to start a war. So yeah, I'm going to kill him." He said it simply, like it was already decided. "Unless you want to stop me." She stared at him, this man she'd just been intimate with, who'd just held her like she mattered, who was now calmly discussing murdering her father. The whiplash was disorienting, the choice he was offering even more so. If I say no, then I don't kill him. I find another way. Make him disappear, ruin him financially, destroy his reputation. But I leave him breathing. He crossed his arms. That's your choice to make, not mine. And you'll resent me for it. No, I'll respect it. There's a difference. He sat back down on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. "Evelyn, I know he's your father. I know that complicates things. But I also know what he did tonight, what he's still capable of doing. And I need you to understand that if I let him live, he remains a threat. To you, to Sarah, to any future we might build." She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped the sheet tighter around herself, and tried to think past the horror and confusion and grief. Tried to separate the father she remembered from the man who'd arranged for bullets to fly at a charity gala. Tried to figure out what she could live with. Finally, she typed, "What would you do if it were your father?" Luca's laugh was bitter. "My father tried to have me killed when I was 19 because he thought I was getting too ambitious. I put him in the ground 3 months later, so my answer isn't going to help you here." "Did you regret it?" "Every single day." He looked away. "And I'd do it again without hesitation. Because some people are poison, Evelyn, and sometimes the only way to survive is to cut them out completely. She thought about her father's face tonight, the desperation in his eyes when he'd tried to approach her, the way he'd said he still loved her, the years of him treating her silence like an inconvenience while simultaneously using it to control her, love and poison. Maybe they weren't mutually exclusive. She typed slowly, each word carefully chosen. I won't ask you to kill him, but I won't ask you to save him either. Do what you think is necessary to keep us safe. I trust your judgment. That's not fair to you. That's me making you complicit without you having to say the words. I know, but I can't be the one to sentence him, and I can't be the one to save him, so I'm choosing to trust you to make the right call. Luca was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Okay, I'll handle it. He stood, finished dressing. I need to make some calls. You should try to sleep. I won't be able to sleep. Yeah, me neither. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Sorry this is your reality now. Sorry your father is who he is. Sorry I can't fix this without someone getting hurt. She wanted to call him back, to say something that would make this easier for both of them, but there were no words for this. No way to bridge the gap between the intimacy they'd just shared and the violence he was about to enact. He left, and she was alone in his bed with her phone and her grief, and the knowledge that her father would be dead by morning. She didn't sleep. Instead, she got dressed, found her way to the living room where Luca was on his phone speaking rapid Italian, and sat on the couch to wait. He glanced at her, surprised, but didn't stop his conversation. Just reached out and pulled her against his side, kept her close, while he coordinated whatever dark business needed coordinating. Around 3 a.m., his phone finally went quiet. He set it down, rubbed his face with both hands. It's done, he said quietly. He's gone, made to look like a suicide. The evidence of his involvement in tonight's shooting will be found by the police tomorrow. The narrative will be that he couldn't live with what he'd done. Evelyn felt nothing. That scared her more than grief would have. She should be crying, screaming, feeling something about her father's death. Instead, she just felt empty. How do I know I won't end up like this? Empty inside? Numb to violence? Luca pulled her closer. Because you're asking that question. Because you're aware of what this world does to people. That awareness is protection. The people who end up empty are the ones who stop noticing, who stop caring. You're not there. You're not even close. How can you be sure? Because you just gave me permission to kill your father, and you're sitting here asking me if you're becoming a monster. A real monster wouldn't care enough to ask. She leaned into him, let him hold her while she processed the impossible reality of her new life. Her father was dead. Her husband had killed him, and she'd chosen not to stop it. I'm sorry, Luca murmured into her hair. I know that doesn't help, but I am. She pulled out her phone. Don't be sorry for protecting us. Be sorry that it was necessary. I am. I'm sorry the world is what it is, that people are what they are, that your father couldn't just let you be happy. Was he right about me being manipulated? No. Luca pulled back to look at her directly. You made choices, real choices. I gave you options, and you picked the ones that felt right to you. That's not manipulation, that's agency. Then why does it feel like I'm losing myself? Because you're changing, becoming someone new. That's not the same as losing yourself. It's growing into the person you were always supposed to be without all the weight holding you down. She wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that the numbness was temporary, that the grief would come later, that she wasn't broken beyond repair. But sitting in the pre-dawn darkness with her father's death settling over her like a blanket, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. Luca's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, frowned. There's something else. What? Sarah's in labor. Ben just texted. They're heading to the hospital now. The news cut through the numbness like a blade. Life and death, happening simultaneously. Her father gone and her niece or nephew arriving. The universe's sense of timing was cruel. We need to go. You sure? It's okay if you need space to... She stood up, cutting off his concern. Typed firmly. My sister needs me. Let's go. The drive to the hospital happened in a blur. Luca held her hand the entire way, his thumb rubbing circles on her palm, grounding her when she started to drift away into thoughts she couldn't afford to have yet. Marco and one other guard followed in a second car, because apparently even childbirth required security now. They found Ben pacing in the waiting room, his hair standing up in 15 directions, his eyes wild with panic. "She's been in labor for 4 hours," he said without preamble. "They're saying everything's fine, but she's in so much pain and I can't do anything," and he noticed Evelyn's expression. "What happened? You both look like you've seen a ghost." "Long story," Luca said. "Tell you later. Where is she?" "Room 304. They said family only." "I'm family now," Luca said, and steered Evelyn toward the elevators. Ben followed, still talking nervously about dilation and contractions and things that made Luca go slightly pale. Sarah was indeed in pain, gripping the bed rails and breathing through a contraction when they entered. When she saw Evelyn, her expression shifted from pain to concern. "What's wrong?" she gasped out. "You look... Did something else happen?" Evelyn glanced at Luca, uncertain how much to say. He gave a slight nod, leaving it up to her. She pulled out her phone, typed quickly. "Dad's dead. Suicide. We can talk about it later. Right now this is about you and the baby." Sarah's eyes went wide, then filled with tears. "Oh my God, Evelyn, I'm so..." Another contraction hit, cutting off whatever she'd been about to say. The next 6 hours passed in a strange fog of crisis and normalcy. Sarah labored while Evelyn held her hand, offering silent support the way she'd done for years. Luca stayed in the corner, looking completely out of his element but refusing to leave. Ben oscillated between panic and excitement, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, a nurse came in to tell them that the police wanted to speak with Evelyn about her father's death. "Not now," Luca said flatly. "She's with her sister. They can wait." "Sir, it's regarding a death investigation." "I said they can wait." His tone left no room for argument. The nurse retreated. At 2:47 p.m., Sarah gave birth to a daughter. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and lungs that proved she had no problem making noise. They named her Emma Catherine, and when the nurse placed her in Evelyn's arms, something cracked open in her chest that had been sealed shut since the accident. This tiny, perfect human who would never know her grandfather, who would grow up in a world shaped by violence and protection and complicated choices, who was innocent and pure and everything Evelyn wanted to keep safe. She looked up to find Luca watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Soft, longing, almost reverent. "She's beautiful," he said quietly, "like her aunt." Sarah, exhausted and glowing, smiled at them from the bed. "You two should have one. You'd make gorgeous babies." "Sarah," Ben said, laughing, "let them breathe. They've been married 2 weeks. I'm just saying, look at them. Look at how Luca's looking at Evelyn holding Emma. That man wants to be a father." Luca's ears went slightly red, but he didn't deny it. Just met Evelyn's eyes across the room with a question he didn't voice. Later, after Sarah and the baby were sleeping and Ben had gone to grab food, Luca and Evelyn stood outside the hospital watching the sun set over the city. She'd been awake for over 30 hours. Her father was dead. Her life had changed irrevocably, and somehow, holding her niece had made everything feel both more complicated and more clear. "You were good with her," Luca said. "Natural." She pulled out her phone. "I've always wanted kids, just never thought I'd have the chance. Why not? Who would want to marry someone who can't talk, who comes with all my baggage?" "I did," he said it simply, "baggage and all. You married me for political reasons. I married you because you were the first person in 10 years who made me want to be better. The politics were just an excuse." He turned to face her fully. "Evelyn, I know today has been hell. I know you're processing things that shouldn't have to be processed, but I need you to know something." She waited. "When I saw you holding Emma, all I could think was that I want that. With you. Not now, obviously. Not until you're ready, if you're ever ready. But someday. I want to build a real family with you, the kind that's messy and loud and nothing like the cold business arrangement I grew up in." Her eyes burned. She typed through blurry vision. "My father died today. You killed him, and I let you. How do we build a family from that? The same way everyone else does. One choice at a time. One day at a time." We make mistakes and we fix them, and we try to be better than our parents were. He cupped her face gently. Your father made his choices. We don't have to be defined by them. We get to choose who we become. What if I choose wrong? Then we fix it together. That's what partners do. She leaned into his touch, let herself be held on a hospital sidewalk while the world kept spinning and her father stayed dead and her niece slept peacefully upstairs. And she thought maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. Could build something good from the wreckage. Could choose to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. Come on, Luca said eventually. Let's get you home. You need sleep. So do you. Yeah, but I'll sleep better knowing you're safe. They drove home through evening traffic, both too exhausted for conversation. When they reached the penthouse, Evelyn headed straight for Luca's bedroom instead of her own, crawled into his bed still wearing her clothes from the gala that felt like a lifetime ago. He joined her without question, pulled her against his chest, and they lay there listening to each other breathe. I love you, Luca said into the darkness. I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But I do. And I thought you should know. She was already half asleep, but she managed to reach for her phone on the nightstand, typed 3 words, showed him the screen. I love you too. His arms tightened around her. Yeah? She nodded against his chest, and for the first time since the gunfire had started, she felt something other than fear or numbness or grief. She felt hope. Tomorrow they'd deal with the police investigation. Tomorrow they'd figure out the political fallout from her father's death and the failed attack. Tomorrow they'd start building whatever came next. But tonight, she let herself rest in the arms of a man who'd killed for her, and would kill again, who'd given her choices when everyone else had taken them away, who saw her silence as something sacred instead of something to exploit. Tonight, that was enough. The grief came 3 days later in the middle of a police interview that should have been routine. Evelyn sat in the sterile conference room at the precinct, Luca on one side and a lawyer he'd hired on the other, while a detective with tired eyes asked questions about her father's state of mind in the weeks before his death. She'd been answering via her phone, keeping her responses short and factual, maintaining the composure that had carried her through the funeral that morning. Then the detective slid a photo across the table. Her father, smiling, from some charity event years ago, before the debts, before the desperation, when he'd still been the man who'd taught her to ride a bike. The sob came out of nowhere, silent but violent enough to shake her whole body. She pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to hold it in, but 13 years of silence meant she'd never learned how to cry quietly. Her shoulders heaved, tears poured down her face, and she couldn't make a sound. Luca's arm came around her immediately. We're done here, he said, his voice hard. My wife just buried her father. You want more questions? Schedule another time. Mr. Moretti, we still need to... I said we're done. He stood, helping Evelyn to her feet, keeping her steady when her legs didn't want to cooperate. Anything else goes through our lawyer. They made it to the car before she completely fell apart. Luca held her in the parking garage while she cried without sound, her body racked with sobs that had no voice, mourning a man who'd loved her and sold her and tried to destroy her all at once. The grief was complicated and messy, and nothing like the clean sadness in movies. It was anger mixed with loss, relief tangled with regret, and the horrible knowledge that she'd never get closure because dead men don't apologize. I've got you, Luca murmured, his hand rubbing circles on her back. Let it out, all of it. It took 20 minutes before the storm passed. When she finally pulled away, his shirt was soaked with her tears and she felt hollowed out, fragile in a way she hadn't since the accident. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I didn't think it would hurt this much. He was your father. Of course it hurts. But he tried to kill me. Kill you. Why do I still miss him? Because love isn't logical. You can hate what someone did and still love who they were. Both things can be true. She leaned against the car, staring up at the concrete ceiling. How long until it stops hurting? I don't know. Years, maybe? Or maybe it never completely stops. You just learn to carry it better. He stood beside her, not touching, but close. My father's been dead 8 years. Sometimes I still dream about him. Sometimes I still wish things had been different. Do you regret killing him? I regret that it was necessary. That's not the same thing. She understood that now. The distinction between regretting an action and regretting the circumstances that made it necessary. Her father's death wasn't something she'd wanted, but it had been the only way to ensure Sarah's safety, her own safety, the possibility of a future not built on his manipulation. That didn't make it hurt less, just made it survivable. They drove home in silence. When they arrived, Marco was waiting in the lobby with a grim expression that made Luca tense. "What now?" Luca asked. "The Valentinos want a meeting tomorrow. They're claiming innocence in the shooting, saying they have proof it was Richard Cross acting alone." "They're not wrong," Luca said. "Yeah, but they're also saying the marriage agreement is void because you killed your father-in-law without their approval. They're calling it a breach of contract." Luca's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Of course they are. Can't let a crisis go to waste." He looked at Evelyn. "You up for this? Or do you need time?" She pulled out her phone. "I'm up for it. What's one more nightmare?" "That's my girl." He pressed a kiss to her temple, then turned back to Marco. "Set it up. Neutral location. I want full security, and I want every piece of evidence we have on Richard's involvement in the shooting ready to present." The meeting was scheduled for the following evening at a restaurant the Valentinos owned in the North End. Luca spent the day preparing, going over strategy with Marco and their lawyer, making calls to allies and contacts who might influence the outcome. Evelyn watched him work, saw the calculated way he maneuvered through his world, and realized she was watching a master at his craft. "You're staring," he said without looking up from his laptop. She typed quickly. "I'm learning. You said I could." "Fair enough. What have you learned so far?" "That you're scarier in a negotiation than you are with a gun." His smile was quick and genuine. "Best compliment I've had all week." That evening, she dressed carefully in a black suit that Sarah had helped her pick out days before. Professional, severe, the kind of outfit that said she wasn't someone to dismiss. She left her hair down, applied minimal makeup, and studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was different from the one who'd sat in that lawyer's office 6 weeks ago. Harder, more aware, less willing to be invisible. "You look like you're ready for war," Luca said from the doorway. "Isn't that what this is?" "Yeah, guess it is." He crossed the room, adjusted her collar slightly. "Remember, you don't have to speak. Your presence is enough. Just be there, be strong, and let me handle the talking. What if they try to use me against you? Then they'll learn that was a mistake." His expression went cold. "No one threatens you without consequences. Not anymore." They arrived at the restaurant to find it closed to the public, security posted at every entrance. Inside, the Valentino family waited at a long table. 3 brothers who ran the organization, their lawyer, and several associates whose job was clearly to look intimidating. Moretti, the eldest brother, Vincent, greeted them without warmth. "And the widow Cross, our condolences on your loss." Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she nodded acknowledgement. Luca pulled out her chair before taking his own seat, a gesture of respect that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Let's skip the pleasantries," Luca said. "You think the marriage agreement is void. I disagree. Make your case." Vincent slid a folder across the table. The agreement stipulated that Richard Cross would be granted protection in exchange for the marriage alliance. You killed him. Therefore, you violated the terms. Richard Cross violated the terms first by hiring a shooter to attack us at a public event, an event where your family members were also present, I might add. Luca produced his own folder. Phone records, financial transactions, witness statements, all proving that Richard orchestrated the shooting to start a war between our families. He was a threat to everyone. I eliminated that threat. Without our permission. I don't need your permission to protect my wife. Luca's tone stayed level, but there was steel underneath. The agreement binds our families through marriage. That marriage still stands. Evelyn is still my wife. Therefore, the alliance holds. Unless the wife chooses to void it, the youngest brother, Anthony, interjected. She could claim coercion, trauma, that you murdered her father and she fears for her safety. All eyes turned to Evelyn. She felt the weight of their attention, the expectation that she'd crumble or flee or give them the excuse they needed to break the agreement and start the war they clearly wanted. Instead, she pulled out her phone, typed carefully, handed it to Vincent to read aloud. He scanned the screen, his expression darkening. Then he read, his voice flat. My father made his choices. He tried to have me killed to serve his own agenda. My husband protected me. The only person I fear in this room is anyone who thinks they can use me as leverage. The marriage stands, the alliance stands, and if you have a problem with that, take it up with me, not him. The silence that followed was deafening. Vincent's brothers exchanged glances. Their lawyer whispered something urgent, and Evelyn kept her chin up, refused to look away, channeled every ounce of strength she had into not backing down. Finally, Vincent smiled. It wasn't friendly, but it was respectful. You've got spine, Mrs. Moretti. I'll give you that. He turned to Luca. The alliance holds, but there will be adjustments to the terms. We want a bigger share of the waterfront development project. And we want quarterly meetings to ensure continued cooperation. Agreed on the meetings. The waterfront split stays as negotiated. Luca leaned back in his chair. But I'll give you first rights on the new construction project in South Boston. Same profit margin, less political headache. They negotiated for another hour, hammering out details that went over Evelyn's head but clearly mattered to everyone involved. She sat quietly, occasionally meeting Luca's eyes when he needed silent confirmation, letting him handle the business while she provided the legitimacy of her presence. When they finally stood to leave, Vincent stopped them at the door. Mrs. Moretti? A word. Luca tensed, but Evelyn nodded. Vincent pulled her aside slightly, spoke quietly enough that his brothers couldn't hear. I knew your father for 20 years. He was a brilliant man who made stupid choices because he was too proud to ask for help. Vincent's gaze was steady. You're not like him. You know when to bend, when to stand firm, when to trust the people around you. That's going to serve you well in this world. She pulled out her phone. Is that a compliment or a warning? Both. He smiled slightly. Your husband is building something different, something that could change how all of us operate. Most of the old guard thinks he's naive, but I think he might be smart enough to pull it off, especially with you beside him. Why are you telling me this? Because I have daughters, and I'd want someone to tell them the truth about the life they're entering. He glanced at Luca, who was watching them with barely concealed suspicion. He's dangerous, your husband, but he's also honest in a way most of us aren't. That's rare. Don't take it for granted. She nodded once, understanding the gift Vincent was offering. Information, perspective, a kind of alliance that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with survival. In the car afterward, Luca immediately asked, What did Vincent say to you? That you're dangerous but honest, that I should trust you. You trust Vincent's judgment? I trust that he gains nothing by lying to me. Luca considered that. Fair point. You did good in there, really good. I know that wasn't easy. It was terrifying, but also kind of powerful. Yeah? He sounded pleased. You feel powerful? I feel like I'm becoming someone I don't recognize. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the old Evelyn needed to change. The old Evelyn survived impossible things. The new Evelyn is just learning to thrive instead of just survive. That's not a bad thing. She leaned her head against the window, watched the city lights blur past. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a silent daughter in her father's house, waiting for permission to exist. Now she was a crime boss's wife who just held her ground in a room full of dangerous men and earned their respect. The transformation should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like finally becoming who she was always meant to be. The next few weeks settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Sarah brought Emma home from the hospital, and Evelyn spent hours holding her niece, teaching Sarah basic sign language so they could communicate when Emma was older. Luca started the process of opening his community center, involving Evelyn in every decision, asking her opinion on programs and design. And slowly, carefully, they built a life together that was messy and complicated and nothing like either of them had expected. The nightmares came occasionally, visions of gunfire and her father's face and all the ways things could have gone wrong. But Luca was always there, pulling her back from the edge, reminding her she was safe. 2 months after the wedding, Evelyn woke up with an idea. She rolled over to find Luca already awake, scrolling through his phone, morning light painting him in gold. Morning, he murmured, setting the phone aside. You okay? You were restless last night. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. I want to start teaching again. Sign language classes. Maybe at your community center, when it opens. Yeah? You sure you're ready? I'm sure I'm tired of hiding. My silence doesn't have to be a limitation. It can be something I teach others to understand. His smile was soft and proud. I love that. We can set up a whole program, classes for families with deaf or mute children, training for businesses, whatever you want. I also want to start therapy, real therapy, with someone who specializes in trauma. That's good. That's really good. He pulled her closer. I'm proud of you for recognizing you need help and asking for it. Are you in therapy? His pause told her the answer. She poked him in the ribs until he admitted, No, but I probably should be. We could go together, couples counseling, deal with all our trauma as a team. You want to subject some poor therapist to both of us? I think we'd be their most interesting case. He laughed, actually laughed, and kissed her thoroughly. Okay, we'll find someone. Do the work. Build something healthy from all this mess. They started therapy the following week with a woman named Dr. Chen who specialized in trauma and didn't bat an eye when Luca explained they'd met through an arranged marriage that involved murder and organized crime. She worked with Evelyn on processing her father's death, the accident that had taken her voice, the 13 years of being treated as invisible. And she worked with both of them on communication, boundaries, and how to build trust when both parties came from backgrounds that taught them trust was a weakness. It was hard. Some sessions left Evelyn feeling raw and exposed. Some ended with Luca pacing the apartment for hours, too agitated to sit still. But slowly, incrementally, they learned to be married to each other instead of just surviving in proximity. 6 months after the wedding, Luca came home from a meeting looking shaken. Evelyn was in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner, a skill she was slowly, painfully acquiring, when he walked in and just stood there. What's wrong? She abandoned the vegetables, went to him. Nothing's wrong. Everything's... He ran his hands through his hair. The FBI contacted me today. They want to make a deal. I give them information on 3 specific families that are still deep in drugs and trafficking, and they grant me immunity for past crimes. Full immunity, Evelyn. A clean slate. Her eyes went wide. She grabbed her phone. What did you say? I said I needed to talk to my wife first. He met her gaze. This is what I've been working toward, going legitimate, but it means betraying people I've known for years. It means becoming an informant, and in this world, that's about the worst thing you can be. Will it put us in danger? Maybe, probably. The families I'd be giving up won't take it lightly. We'd need to increase security. Maybe relocate for a while. He cupped her face. But it would also mean our kids, if we have kids, wouldn't grow up with their father facing prison time. Wouldn't have to explain why daddy does things that are illegal. You want kids. I want a future that isn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I want to build something that lasts. And I can't do that while I'm still tied to the old ways. She thought about it, about the danger versus the possibility, about what kind of life they could have if Luca was truly free from his past, about the community center and her teaching and the family they might build. Do it. Take the deal. You're sure? Because once I do this, there's no going back. We burn bridges, make enemies, start completely over. I'm sure. We burn it all down and build something better. His kiss was fierce and grateful and full of promise. Okay, we do this together. The next year was chaos. Luca testified in closed hearings. 3 major families were indicted. There were threats, attempts on their lives, a month where they relocated to a safe house in Vermont while the FBI rounded up the most dangerous elements. But there was also progress. The community center opened, offering everything from job training to addiction counseling to Evelyn's sign language classes. Luca's legitimate businesses flourished, and slowly their reputation shifted from criminal empire to philanthropic success story. It wasn't perfect. Some of Luca's old associates never forgave him. There were still moments of violence, still threats that Marco and the security team had to handle. But they were building something real, something that might actually last. 14 months after their courthouse wedding, Evelyn missed her period. She took 3 pregnancy tests, all positive, then sat on the bathroom floor trying to process the implications. A baby. Their baby. A tiny human who would inherit both their strengths and their damage. When Luca came home that evening, she handed him the test without preamble. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he set it down carefully, pulled her into his arms, and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "You okay with this?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. She nodded against his chest, pulled out her phone, terrified. "But okay. You?" "Same. I have no idea how to be a father. My own dad was a nightmare. What if I screw this up? Then we'll screw it up together and figure it out as we go, like everything else." He laughed, the sound wet with tears he wasn't ashamed to show. "Yeah, okay, we can do this." They told Sarah and Ben the following week, at a family dinner that had become a weekly tradition. Sarah screamed loud enough to wake Emma, who started crying, which made everyone laugh through tears. Ben shook Luca's hand with genuine warmth, the initial wariness long since transformed into real friendship. "Emma's going to have a cousin," Sarah said, bouncing her daughter gently. "Oh my God, they're going to grow up together. This is perfect." "Perfect is a strong word," Luca said, but he was grinning. "We're probably going to have the most protective kid in Boston." "Good," Sarah declared. "That's what family is for." The pregnancy was difficult. Morning sickness that lasted all day, complications that required bed rest, moments of terror when they thought they might lose the baby. But Luca was there for all of it, attending every appointment, learning everything he could about pregnancy and childbirth, building a nursery with his own hands because he needed something productive to do with his anxiety. 8 months in, lying in bed while Luca assembled yet another piece of baby furniture, Evelyn had a sudden clarity about everything that had happened. The forced marriage that became real, the violence that made way for peace, the loss of her father that freed her to become herself. All of it had been necessary to get her here, to this moment, this life, this future. She grabbed her phone. "Do you ever regret how we started?" Luca looked up from the instruction manual he was frowning at. "Honestly? Sometimes. I wish we'd met different. Wish I could have courted you properly instead of essentially buying you from your father. Wish our foundation wasn't built on trauma and violence. But I don't think we would have found each other any other way. You needed someone who would see your strength. I needed someone who would challenge me to be better. The circumstances were horrible, but they brought us together. So no, I don't regret it. I just wish it had been easier for you. It made me who I am. I'm not sure I'd change that even if I could. Who are you?" He set down the manual, gave her his full attention. "Now, who do you think you've become?" She thought about it, typed slowly, choosing her words carefully. Someone who isn't afraid of silence, someone who knows her worth, someone who can stand in a room full of dangerous people and hold her ground, someone who's going to teach her child that voice comes in many forms and all of them matter. "I love who you've become," Luca said quietly. "I love who you're still becoming. Every single day, you surprise me. Good surprises or bad surprises? The best kind. The ones that make me fall more in love with you." She held out her hand. He came to the bed, curled up beside her despite the pile of unassembled furniture, and they lay there feeling their baby move between them, planning a future that seemed impossible and perfect and absolutely worth fighting for. Their daughter was born on a snowy February evening, 3 weeks early and impatient to join the world. They named her Catherine Rose after both grandmothers, and when the nurse placed her in Evelyn's arms for the first time, she understood what people meant when they said love could be overwhelming. This tiny person, with Luca's dark eyes and her own stubborn chin, represented everything they'd fought for. Every choice they'd made, every bridge they'd burned, every moment of terror and hope and desperate faith that they could build something good from the wreckage. Luca stood beside the hospital bed, one hand on Evelyn's shoulder, the other gently touching their daughter's impossibly small fingers. His eyes were wet, his expression awestruck. "We made a person," he whispered. "A whole entire person." Evelyn smiled, exhausted and happy, and more complete than she'd ever felt. She grabbed her phone with one hand, typed clumsily. "We made a family." "Yeah, we did." He kissed her forehead, then Catherine's. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know you're loved. You're safe, you're valued, all the things I never had. All the things I never had either. We break the cycle." "We break the cycle," he agreed. Sarah and Ben arrived an hour later with Emma, who was now walking and chattering in toddler gibberish. She stood on tiptoe to peek at the baby, her eyes huge with wonder. "Baby," she declared, "my baby." "Your cousin," Sarah corrected, laughing. "You're going to be the best big cousin, aren't you?" Emma nodded solemnly, then proceeded to lecture Catherine in nonsense words that made everyone laugh. That night, after the visitors had left and Catherine was sleeping in her bassinet, Luca climbed into the hospital bed beside Evelyn despite the nurse's protests about it being too small. "Tell me what you're thinking," he said. She was too tired to type, so she just pressed her phone into his hands where she'd already written her thoughts. "I'm thinking about how far we've come. From a forced marriage to this, from strangers to parents, from survival to something that feels like joy. I'm thinking that if someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be here, I wouldn't have believed them. And I'm thinking that despite everything, all the pain and loss and violence, I wouldn't change it. Because it brought me here. To you, to her, to us." He read it twice, his throat working. Then he set the phone aside and just held her, careful of all the wires and monitors, careful of her still healing body. "I don't deserve you," he murmured. "Either of you, but I'm going to spend every day trying to earn this family, this life, this second chance." She patted his chest twice, their signal for "I love you" when words were too much or typing too slow. He patted back, the rhythm they'd developed over months of learning each other's language. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and probably difficult, still shadowed by Luca's past and the enemies they'd made. But for the first time, Evelyn wasn't afraid of what came next. She had her voice, not in sound, but in action and choice, and the family she was building. She had a partner who saw her strength and challenged her to use it. She had a daughter who would grow up knowing that silence could be powerful, that love could be complicated, that families were built not just by blood, but by the choices people made every single day. 3 months later, the community center hosted its grand opening celebration. Evelyn's sign language program had 15 students enrolled, ranging from parents of deaf children to healthcare workers to curious individuals who wanted to communicate better with the world around them. The center itself offered job training, counseling services, educational programs, and a safe space for people who'd been forgotten by the system. Luca gave a speech about second chances and community responsibility that was surprisingly moving for a man who'd spent half his life as a criminal. The mayor attended, as did several business leaders and community organizers. It was legitimacy, real and earned, the kind that couldn't be bought or forced. Evelyn stood at the back of the crowd, Catherine strapped to her chest in a carrier, and watched her husband transform their painful past into something that might actually help people. When he finished speaking, his eyes found hers across the room, and his smile was pure and genuine and full of love. After the speeches, a reporter from the local news approached them, asking for an interview about their philanthropic work. Luca handled most of the questions, but then the reporter turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Moretti, you're teaching sign language here. Can you tell us why that's important to you?" She pulled out her phone, typed her response, and handed it over for the reporter to read. "I lost my voice 13 years ago in an accident. For a long time, I let that silence define me as a limitation. But silence can be a language all its own. It just requires people to listen differently. I'm teaching sign language because I want to help others communicate in ways that matter. Because everyone deserves to be heard, regardless of whether they can speak." The reporter read it on camera, and something shifted in Evelyn's chest. This was her voice. Different than it had been before the accident, but no less powerful. Maybe more powerful, because she'd learned to use it intentionally instead of carelessly. That evening, back at the penthouse with Catherine sleeping peacefully in her nursery, Luca pulled Evelyn onto the balcony overlooking the harbor. The same view they'd had since the beginning, but everything else had changed. "You know what I realized today?" he said, his arm around her shoulders. "We actually did it. We took something broken and made it whole. We took violence and turned it into peace. We took forced arrangements and made them into choice." She leaned into him, pulled out her phone. "We're still a work in progress." "Yeah, but that's the point, isn't it? We don't have to be perfect. We just have to keep choosing each other. Keep choosing to be better." "I choose you, every day. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her face. "I choose you too, you and Catherine and whatever chaos comes next. This is my family. This is what I protect. This is what I live for. She kissed him, standing on the balcony where she'd once felt trapped and now felt free. The city spread out below them, full of possibility and danger, and a million lives being lived in the spaces between. Somewhere out there, people were making choices that would define their futures, some good, some terrible, all of them mattering. And here, in this moment, Evelyn chose love, chose partnership, chose the messy, complicated, beautiful life she'd built from the wreckage of who she'd been. Her father had tried to make her invisible. The accident had taken her voice. The world had tried to erase her, but she'd survived all of it. She'd found strength in silence, power in choice, love in the last place she'd expected. She'd become not just visible, but undeniable, a wife, a mother, a teacher, a force in her own right. The voiceless bride had found her voice, not in sound, but in action. Not in words, but in the life she chose to live, the family she chose to protect, the future she chose to build. And that, she thought, as Catherine stirred in the nursery and Luca held her close under the stars, was more than enough. It was everything.